Hello there. To solve a murder case, we first need to clarify the nature of the case, such as whether the victim committed suicide or was murdered. This is because only this way can investigators orient themselves to solve the case. But today, we will discuss a case that contains both elements, which is extremely complex and involves incredibly unbelievable coincidences. On the night of November 14, 2004, at around 4 a.m., the Yushan Town Police Department received a report that a murder had occurred in a building, and the police quickly arrived at the scene. Here they found the victim's body full of wounds, surrounded by a lot of blood. In theory, such a gruesome scene would surely cause a lot of noise. But strangely, after investigation, those around did not hear any fighting noises. It's unimaginable for such a crime to happen in a quiet environment. From the beginning, this was an abnormal case. The victim's name was Zhao Ledi. He and 5 companions had just arrived from Shandong to work in Yushan Town. This was their first night here. Because of the long journey that took 30 hours on the train, they went to bed very early that night. At 4 a.m., his colleague Zhao Tufeng went into the bathroom and saw someone lying at the bathroom door. Tufeng approached to check and immediately notified the police. At the crime scene, the body lay between the bathroom and the corridor within a range of 3 to 4 meters with a lot of blood. The forensic examiner stated that the time of death was around midnight. Beside Ledi was a blood-stained kitchen knife and a rusty saw with some human skin still left on the saw blade, matching the cut on the victim's neck. After preliminary examination, the police believed this was the scene of a typical murder. The murderer attempted to dismember the victim with a saw after committing the crime. But what surprised the police was that when they went to the first floor, on the kitchen door frame, they saw a belt tied into an O shape, and below it was a stool covered in blood. It looked like someone was preparing to commit suicide. When the police moved the stool, they found blood underneath, meaning the person had been seriously injured before stepping on the stool to commit suicide. This seemed very illogical. Why would someone who was already seriously injured seek death? Immediately afterward, forensic investigators found 3 bloody fingerprints on the belt. This discovery would greatly assist in solving the case. However, what no one expected was that these 3 fingerprints belonged to the body found in the bathroom. This result stunned the police. Why would the victim hang himself, but ultimately end up in the bathroom? Some speculate that it was a trap set by the culprit. He held the victim's hand and deliberately left fingerprints at the scene. To solve this question, forensic doctors conducted an autopsy, while forensic staff re-examined the scene. However, the examination results only increased the mystery of the case. There were bloodstains evenly distributed on both sides of the doorframe, very suitable for a situation where someone was stepping from the ground onto the stool. Above the doorframe, the police found another fingerprint, and it was not surprising that it also belonged to Ledi. The police also tried to lift a person of the same weight as the victim and hold his hand to deliberately create fingerprints. But the results showed that this could not be done. The victim's fingerprints were naturally formed. From this, it can be concluded that the blood stains on the kitchen door frame and the fingerprints on the belt were made by Ledi before his death without the intervention of others. But Ledi's purpose was to come here to work and make money, so why would he seek death? And why would Ledi travel over 1,000 kilometers to this town to commit suicide? To solve this question, the police investigated in a different way. Based on the memories of his companions, Ledi recounted that on the way, 2 people were following and trying to harm him, which shocked everyone. But when they turned back, they found no suspects. Upon arriving in Yushan Town, Ledi again told them that the 2 people had come here to rob him. However, in reality, Ledi and his 5 companions had just come here to find new jobs, and Ledi only had 20 yuan on him. How could these 2 people follow him for thousands of kilometers just for this amount of money? The police argued that Letty might have a mental illness coupled with fatigue from the journey. Hallucinations made him intend to commit suicide, but they couldn't explain the numerous wounds on his body and the kitchen knife and saw left at the scene. The autopsy revealed 3 blunt force trauma wounds on the victim's forehead, parallel to each other. If caused by someone else, such wounds could not have been inflicted in that way, as instinctively humans would dodge attacks, resulting in diagonal force. And there were no defensive wounds found on Letty's body from struggling with the assailant. So, there was only one possibility. Letty endured the pain and inflicted wounds on himself. A piece of wood matching the characteristics of the wounds was also found at the crime scene, with Letty's hair still on it. Based on various tests and different clues, the police concluded that Letty was physically and mentally exhausted after a long journey and developed suicidal thoughts. First, he used the piece of wood to harm himself, but realized he couldn't achieve his goal. Then he went to the kitchen, approached the doorframe, and took off his belt to hang himself in an O shape. But out of fear, Letty wandered to find a quicker way to commit suicide. Finally, he took the kitchen knife and ended his life. This explanation seems plausible, but it overlooks an important clue. If Letty used the kitchen knife, then what was the saw used for? While the issue of the saw remained unresolved, forensic doctors found another clue. The fatal wound on Letty's neck, with multiple cuts, was so severe that it penetrated deeply into the cervical spine. Imagine a person physically and mentally drained. How could this be possible? Surely Letty did not cause this himself. Subsequently, forensic doctors also concluded that the victim had been murdered. So far, the case has left the police and detectives puzzled. They cannot understand why the perpetrator would want to kill someone who was ready to commit suicide. The forensic examiners continued to examine the crime scene. First, at the location where the victim's body was found at the bathroom door, there was no large pool of blood on the ground, but there were many bloodstains about 3-4 meters away, indicating that Letty had been there for some time. Later, forensic doctors found a small wound on Letty's abdomen, which was covered by clothing. After confirming that the wound occurred after death, the nature of the case was resolved. Finally, the police confirmed that Letty had been murdered, but a new question arose. Why would such an extraordinary person be in this small town with a population of 20,000? What method did he use to create such a perfect fake scene and deceive all the police? But why was he so careless to leave behind the knife and saw at the crime scene? Was he intentionally taunting the police? And how did the murderer prevent Letty from calling for help when being killed? Now that the nature of the case has been determined, the police's top priority is to find the suspect, and they have conducted investigations based on the most basic facts. Firstly, what was the motive? Letty was from Shandong, a simple, kind, and friendly person who got along well with neighbors and didn't cause any animosity. On the first night he arrived in Yushan town, he was killed, and there was no missing property on his body. Forensic experts found no cigarette butts, hair, fingerprints, or other physical evidence at the scene, so there might not have been anyone else near Letty when he died. There are only 3 doors in the building, one on the rooftop, which was covered in spider webs, so the possibility of someone breaking in from there can be ruled out. In the kitchen, there is another door, but it was securely locked and showed no signs of being forced open. Therefore, only the front door of the building remained, but after inspection, it also showed no signs of being forced open. So the suspect may have hidden here beforehand and waited for the opportunity to kill Letty, right? If so, the killer would have left the crime scene after committing the crime through the front door. While there was a lot of blood at the scene, if the perpetrator had left, they would surely have left some blood stains. But in reality, no blood was found on the front door, which rules out the possibility of an outsider committing the crime. So, could it be someone from inside? After investigation, this situation seems unlikely. Firstly, the 5 companions were close relatives and friends from the same hometown, and they had no motive to commit a crime. If they wanted to kill someone, they should have acted on the way here. So why wait until now? Wouldn't this be more likely to be exposed? Therefore, the 5 companions could basically be ruled out. But there were still 2 local technicians, which also seemed unlikely because these 2 employees were randomly assigned from the recruiting agency. When Letty and his group came to work, these 2 people didn't even know his name. The case seemed so inexplicable that none of the 7 people in the building seemed to have any motive for the crime. The case seemed to have reached a deadlock. Could there really be someone patient enough to silently kill Letty after following him for thousands of kilometers? If so, there must be a reason. A worker without money, so why kill him? Furthermore, in a case with no clear motive, the perpetrator carefully staged the scene as a suicide, which is meaningless. Moreover, Lady revealed to his companions that someone was following him to harm him. Could this situation be real, rather than an illusion? At present, the only way to explain this case is that there was a superhuman killer involved. But as a detective, no matter how complex a case is, there must be clues to follow. Detectives don't believe in supernatural and illogical phenomena. They decided to simplify everything and believed that the truth must exist at the crime scene. Fingerprints, the wound on the forehead, could be used to determine the existence of suicidal behavior. The wound behind the neck and the wound on the abdomen also matched the scenario of someone wanting to kill Letty with no evidence of anyone entering or leaving the scene, so the murderer could only be one of the 7 people in the building. All the detectives needed to do at this point was to figure out how to combine these complex and conflicting factors to form a complete picture of the case. After much consideration, someone came up with a completely new hypothesis. Since there was no bathroom on the upper floor, someone went downstairs to use the bathroom on the night of the incident and happened to encounter Lady attempting suicide. The 2 argued about something that eventually led to a murder. If this theory is correct, all the previously conflicting clues could be explained. The case seemed to be on the right track, although the police had previously interrogated the 7 people. But this time, the interrogation had a clearer goal, and all 7 people took turns lying. As predicted, technician Huang Tu-Lei failed the test. The police immediately questioned him further, using strong psychological tactics, and Lei broke down and confessed. Around midnight, Lei went downstairs to use the bathroom and saw Lady hanging his belt on the doorframe. Instinctively, Lei asked what Letty was doing, if he wanted to commit suicide. At this point, Letty had already used a wooden stick to hit himself, so he was unconscious. Then, Letty muttered something and went into the kitchen to grab a knife and rushed at Lee. Terrified, Lee grabbed a wooden stick and hit Letty's leg. Then Lei grabbed the kitchen knife, as it was already midnight and Lei was just waking up, so his actions were beyond control. By the time Lei realized, it was too late. Later, to cover up the crime, Lei dragged Letty into the bathroom and intended to dismember him with a saw. But Lei was just an ordinary person who unintentionally committed a crime. He quickly regained consciousness and eventually abandoned this cruel act. On January 30th, 2005, the prosecutor's office of Nanbing City, Fujian Province, prosecuted Huang Tu-Lei for intentional homicide. On March 16th, the court ruled that Lee's initial actions were within the scope of legitimate self-defense, but later pulling Letty into the bathroom to dismember him did not qualify as self-defense. Lee was criminally responsible for intentional homicide. However, considering the victim's significant fault in this case, the court sentenced Huang Tu-Lei to 15 years in prison. I've read many cases, and I think this case is very special. In an age where evidence is crucial, logical reasoning is often overlooked, but in reality, the truth is usually not as complicated as we imagine. It's still there, waiting for us to discover. And that's the case for today. What do you think of the case? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. If you liked our video, please like it and subscribe to the channel to follow the next mysteries. Thank you and see you again. Goodbye.